Redstone would never forget that night. The saloon echoed with gunfire, glass shattering, and the cries of those who would not live to see the morning. Blood stained the floorboards where laughter once rang, but it all began with a single voice, a song cut short by cruel hands, and a sheriff who refused to bow. That spark set the town ablaze, dragging everyone into a storm of love, betrayal, and death. Who would survive when justice and desire collided in the firelight? And who would pay the ultimate price for Redstone's freedom? This is the story of the songbird of Redstone, a tale of fire, blood, and the love that refused to die. If you enjoy stories of the Wild West filled with danger, passion, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and join our trail. Now, let's ride back to that night when a single bullet set Redstone ablaze. The night in Redstone was thick with smoke and whiskey. Inside the Golden Lily Saloon, laughter clashed with the crack of glass. Clara Whitmore stood on stage, her voice rising like a fragile flame against the storm of drunken voices. Men shouted at the bar. Coins slammed onto sticky tables. The piano player's hands stumbled, nearly drowned by the noise. Yet Clara sang on, her eyes steady, her dress shimmering under oil lamps, a small rebellion against the chaos that ruled this cursed town. Then the door burst open. A squad from the Union Guard Company stormed in, boots thundering against the floorboards. Their leader, drunk with power and Crowley's whiskey, climbed onto the stage and yanked Clara by the arm. Her song cut short. The crowd whistled. Some jeered. Others froze. She struggled, nails scratching against his leather sleeve, but he only laughed louder. "Tonight," he sneered, "the Golden Lily sings for Silas Crowley." The name alone silenced half the room. Everyone knew who owned the shadows in Redstone, the man who turned a mining town into his personal kingdom of fear. The piano lid slammed shut. The man dragged Clara down, her shoes scraping wood, her breath sharp with terror. She cried out once, but her voice vanished under the roar of drunken cheers. And then another sound pierced the chaos, a sharp, commanding voice that cut through smoke and heat like a blade. "Let her go!" Every head turned toward the door. Sheriff Daniel Hale stood framed against the desert night, his coat dusty from patrol, revolver gleaming at his side. His face was granite, but his eyes burned with something deeper than duty. The guard sneered. "Redstone's law dog thinks he owns the stage." He shoved Clara forward, daring Hale to move. "This pretty bird belongs to Mr. Crowley now." Daniel's hand never trembled, his gaze fixed on Clara, taking in her torn sleeve. The fear she couldn't quite hide, then back to the brute holding her. The silence between them felt heavier than gunpowder. A chair toppled. Someone whispered, "It's Crowley's men. This won't end clean." Clara's lips quivered. For a breath, she met Daniel's eyes. A plea, unspoken but burning, passed between them and something else. Recognition. As if they'd been waiting their whole lives for this moment. The guard reached for his pistol. The room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's revolver fired first, the thunder shaking every glass on the shelves. The man fell hard against the stage, his grip loosening from Clara's wrist. She staggered back, clutching her arm, gasping as the crowd erupted in panic. Smoke drifted from Daniel's gun, his stance steady as stone. Two more guards rose, hands twitching near their holsters. "Step back," Daniel warned, voice low but unshakable. The crowd scrambled for cover, boots pounding, bottles shattering on the floor. Clara pressed against the stage, heart hammering. She had seen gunfights before, but this one was different. This wasn't just law against crime. This was the first crack in Crowley's armor. Daniel moved forward, coat swaying with each step. He kept the revolver trained on the men, but his eyes kept drifting to Clara, as if she were the only reason he dared to stand against Crowley's empire. Another shot rang out, glass exploded behind the bar. Shouts filled the room, curses thrown like knives. But no one dared cross the sheriff's aim. In the chaos, Clara found herself breathing again, the weight of every threat still pressed on her shoulders. But in Daniel's presence, something like hope wrapped around her heart. The remaining guards backed toward the door, unwilling to die for their fallen comrade. "Crowley will hear about this." One spat. Daniel's voice was steel. "Tell him I'm waiting." As the dust settled and the last of Crowley's men disappeared into the night, Daniel holstered his weapon. The Golden Lily trembled in the aftermath, caught between fear and something that might have been freedom. Clara stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Their eyes met across the wreckage of overturned tables and shattered glass. Neither spoke the words that hung between them, but both understood this was the night when everything changed. This was the night when Redstone learned that law could bleed, but love would risk everything. To understand why blood spilled on the Golden Lily's floor, one had to look back to when Redstone still had hope. 5 years earlier, this had been a different town. Families arrived with wagons full of dreams. Children laughed along wooden sidewalks, and the future gleamed bright as the gold in the hills. But wealth attracts wolves. Silas Crowley came first as a trader, selling tools and whiskey to miners. Within months, he controlled supply lines, then debt, then men's souls. The Union Guard Company was his masterpiece, officially hired to protect caravans, but in truth a private army answering only to his gold. By the time Redstone reached 4,000 souls, his grip was iron. Every saloon, every gambling den, every judge whispered his name with fear. Clara Whitmore had arrived in the midst of this transformation, carrying little more than a broken suitcase and secrets she never shared. Her past lay scattered across dusty towns, each leaving scars that taught her to survive on song and silence. But Clara was dangerous in ways she didn't realize. Her voice carried something that made hardened men pause, a sorrow so pure it reminded them of the humanity they traded for gold. When she sang of loss, of longing, of hope barely alive, even Crowley's men felt the weight of what they'd become. Crowley noticed her beauty first, then the way silence fell when she took the stage. He decided she would be his prize, whether she wished it or not. Clara resisted by choosing the Golden Lily, the one saloon not yet under his thumb. Every night on stage became an act of defiance, each song a soft rebellion against the darkness swallowing her town. She knew her safety was gossamer thin. Behind curtains, voices warned her, "Crowley doesn't let go. He never lets go." Still, she sang. Sheriff Daniel Hale arrived 6 months later, wearing his badge like a hair shirt. Few knew his past, and fewer dared to ask, but Clara saw the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders, the way his hand rested on his gun, even in sleep. Years before, Daniel had ridden with hired guns in Nevada, his hands stained with choices that haunted his dreams. When that life ended, guilt followed him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Redstone offered redemption, but redemption had a price. His first months were battles of silence. The townsfolk watched with wary eyes, wondering if he was just another man for sale. Daniel proved otherwise through small acts, jailing knife-wielding drunks, breaking up fights with steady calm, carrying a bleeding boy to safety when others looked away. Clara first truly saw him that night, the night he risked himself for a stranger's child. As he emerged from the alley, the boy safe in his arms, she sang a song just for him. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as his eyes lifted to hers. Neither spoke, yet something took root between them. The courtship that followed was conducted in glances across crowded rooms, in the way he lingered near the Golden Lily during evening patrol, in how her voice grew stronger when she spotted his silhouette in the doorway. But love in Redstone was a dangerous luxury. Crowley's letters began appearing under Clara's door, promises of riches if she surrendered, threats carved into the wood outside her window when she refused. Daniel warned her to leave, to find safety elsewhere. "If I run," she whispered, "Crowley wins, and this town dies a little more." That defiance bound them together. In Clara, Daniel saw courage without cruelty, everything his violent past had lacked. In Daniel, Clara found someone willing to stand between her and the darkness. Their first kiss came after another narrow escape from Crowley's men. Daniel had appeared in the alley behind the saloon, just as 3 guards closed in with knives gleaming. 2 shots later, Clara was safe but shaking in his arms. "Why do you keep risking yourself for me?" she asked, voice unsteady. Daniel paused, then answered with devastating honesty, "Because you're the only good thing left in this town, and I've spent too many years destroying good things." For Clara, those words cut deeper than any threat. Her heart, guarded for so long, cracked open just enough to let him in. The town began to whisper not just gossip, but something approaching hope. If the sheriff and the singer could stand against Crowley, perhaps Redstone wasn't lost after all. But hope invites retaliation. Crowley ordered his men to remind the sheriff who owns this town. Ambushes followed, bullets whistling through dark alleys. Daniel survived, but scars multiplied on his body and his soul. The confrontation came on Main Street at high noon, with half the town watching from behind shuttered windows. "You think you can protect her?" Crowley sneered, his expensive suit a mockery of the sheriff's dusty coat. Daniel's voice was quiet steel. "I can, and I will." Crowley laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "This town eats men like you. When she screams, you'll know what real power is." Daniel didn't draw his gun, though rage burned in his chest. He knew killing Crowley in the street would turn him into a murderer, not a protector. Instead, he made a promise that would echo through Redstone streets. "Touch her, and I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." That night, Clara wept in his arms, not from fear, but from the terrible knowledge that their love had painted a target on both their backs. "If you die for me," she whispered against his chest, "I'll never forgive myself." Daniel held her tighter, pressing his lips to her hair. "You won't lose me. Not to him, not to anyone." The promise was fragile as spun glass, but it was all they had. As winter approached, Redstone balanced on a knife's edge. Every shadow might hide Crowley's men. Every sunset brought new threats. But in the Golden Lily, Clara sang with new power, not just of sorrow, but of love worth fighting for. The town listened, and in her voice, they heard their own longing for freedom. The stage was set for war. The storm was coming, and it would wash Redstone clean or drown it in blood. Dawn bled into Redstone with a tired, yellow light. A wagon still smoldered outside the sheriff's office, its wheels twisted and black. Someone had nailed a scorched board to the door surrender. Daniel Hale pried it loose without a word. Clara watched him from the steps, the taste of smoke still in her throat. Redstone breathed fear in every doorway. Silas Crowley did not hide behind curtains anymore. He paraded down Main Street with Union Guard riders in a velvet coat that caught the sun. He smiled like a man who owned the ground. Prices spiked at the market. Bread cost double, medicine triple, and tempers frayed to thread. 2 miners who spoke of resistance vanished at dusk. Their bodies swung at dawn from a timber beam outside the Gilded Ace. A message was painted below them in red, still wet. No one said the name, but everyone heard it in their heads. Daniel nailed a tarp over the scene and cut the ropes himself. He carried each man down with a gentleness that made people turn away. When he met Clara's eyes, his jaw was already set for war. That evening, he gathered a handful of men in the lamplit office. They spoke softly over crude maps and doorways that let in dust. No one asked who would come to their funerals. Clara stitched a tear in Daniel's coat and kept her voice steady. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. He answered by placing her hand over his heartbeat. The day Silas picked for his spectacle was Sunday. He announced it like a holiday justice in the square at noon. No one confused the word. A wooden platform rose beside the Gilded Ace by morning. Rope hung limp, pale as a snake. Union Guard men fanned out along the rooftops and rails. Clara stood in the crowd with a shawl around her shoulders. Daniel moved like a shadow at the edge, coat buttoned tight. Between them, a street full of held breath. Silas climbed the platform with a showman's ease. He praised law, order, and the price of disobedience. His voice was honey poured over a knife. They dragged a storekeeper forward, the man who refused to sell on credit to guards. His wife cried out once and swallowed the rest. Silas smiled as if calming a horse. Daniel stepped into the light before anyone saw him coming. "Let him go," he said, voice carrying like a bell. "Your law has no paper and no judge." Guns twitched along the balconies. Silas turned, the smile thinning. "Sheriff," he said, "you are late to the lesson." "End it today," Daniel replied. "Take your men and disappear. Redstone isn't yours." The ropes swayed in the wind, whispering of gravity. Silas took one step toward Daniel and one toward the crowd. He wanted all of them to see. "Redstone is mine because no one has the stomach to take it back." The first shot came from a rooftop to Daniel's left. He dropped behind a trough, boards exploding into splinters. The square crackled with panic and dust. Two more shots snapped the air. Daniel returned fire once, clean and fast. A guard toppled from the balcony, arms pinwheeling as he fell. A lantern shattered near the platform, oil licking across the planks. Men shouted, boots hammered wood, and the rope swung like a pendulum. Clara pushed through bodies, searching for Daniel's coat. Silas barked orders, pointing with his cane. "Shoot the sheriff. Leave the whore for last." His words cut the noise like a whip. On the platform, a young guard lifted his rifle with shaking hands. He had never fired into a square full of neighbors. The barrel tracked from Daniel to Clara and back again. "Hold!" Silas snapped, grabbing the boy's sleeve. The boy flinched, the rifle jerked, and the shot snapped wild. Silas stiffened as if a hook had caught him from behind. For half a heartbeat, no one believed it. Silas's velvet turned dark at the shoulder, then darker at the chest. He reached for air that wasn't there. The square fell into a stunned hush. The young guard stumbled backward, face drained to chalk. His rifle clattered against the post like a dropped tool. Silas sank to one knee and then the other. He looked out over Redstone, searching for a face to blame. There was no one left to wear it. Daniel rose as the gunfire guttered. He did not smile, did not take a bow. He only watched as the man who had owned Redstone's shadow bled into the boards. Union guards wavered without a voice to command them. One ran. Another pushed his way through the crowd and vanished. A third, scarred, older, stared at Silas with something like relief. Clara reached the platform steps and stopped. Her hands shook in the space between mercy and memory. Daniel's palm found her shoulder and steadied it. "Get the people home," he told the men beside him. "Get the families off the street." His voice was calm enough to borrow. By dusk, the platform was empty. The rope lay coiled like a dead thing in the dirt. Redstone did not cheer. It exhaled. But power never leaves a vacuum for long. At midnight, a rider slipped out of town on a lathered horse. He took the north road, where the desert keeps secrets. In the Iron Serpent's back room, a handful of guards argued over a half-empty bottle. "Silas is gone," one muttered, staring at the table. "We ain't getting paid for this." The scarred one Pike drained his glass and said nothing. He had watched a king fall in daylight. It made every crown look made of twine. Clara and Daniel sat on the jailhouse steps, the sky hard with stars. She leaned into him as if the day might blow her away. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and pretended it was a wall. "Is it over?" she asked, voice quiet as paper. "No," he answered, eyes on the dark. "It just changed its shape." 3 days later, hooves thundered on Redstone's main road. Dust rose like a curtain no wind could lift. Men in unfamiliar coats rode under it with practiced cruelty. The one in front carried the Crowley jaw and a colder fire in his eyes. He reined up outside the Iron Serpent and smiled as if he'd been expected. "Marcus," someone whispered, "from Silver Butte." Clara's fingers tightened around Daniel's. The town that had lost a tyrant now faced an heir, and the week had not yet found its Sunday. Sunday arrived in Redstone, draped in silence. The desert sky burned brass and copper, casting long shadows across streets emptied of laughter. Everyone knew what was coming. By noon, Marcus Crowley and his riders thundered into town. 20 hard men, eyes flat and dead, dust trailing behind them like smoke. They rode with the arrogance of ownership, scattering children and livestock. Marcus dismounted in front of the Iron Serpent, his cousin's old stronghold. He was younger than Silas, but his cruelty burned hotter, unchecked by patience. Where Silas spun webs, Marcus swung blades. The Iron Serpent came alive by dusk. Its windows glowed red. Its walls thrummed with raucous music and harsh laughter. Every gambler, mercenary, and drunk loyal to the Crowleys gathered inside. Daniel Hale prepared in silence. He polished his Colt, checked the Winchester's chamber, tied his badge tight to his vest. The weight on his chest was heavier than steel. Clara watched him from the doorway of his office. She had chosen her best dress, blue silk, though smoke still clung to its hem from the last fire. Her hair shimmered under lamplight, pinned with trembling hands. "You don't have to sing tonight," Daniel said. His voice was rough from long hours without sleep. "We could find another way." Clara lifted her chin, steady despite the fear in her chest. "He needs to hear what he's trying to destroy. He needs to see what he'll never own." Daniel swallowed hard, knowing she was right. The streets emptied as the sun fell. Families barred their doors. Lamps dimmed behind shutters. Only the Iron Serpent blazed, its glow painting the dust like spilled blood. Clara entered first, her steps echoing against the floorboards. The crowd jeered, then hushed, curiosity pinning them silent. Marcus Crowley rose from his chair, pale eyes sharp as winter ice. "The songbird," he said, lips curling. "My cousin was right about you. Said your voice could stop men mid-breath." He gestured to the stage with a mocking flourish. Clara climbed the steps, every heartbeat loud in her ears. She began to sing not for Marcus, but for the town she loved. Her voice soared above the smoke, clear and defiant. It was a hymn of redemption, of lost souls finding home again. Men shifted uneasily, hands falling from cards and glasses. Even killers paused, haunted by notes they couldn't shake. For a moment, the Iron Serpent felt holy, but Marcus's laughter shattered it. "Enough," he barked, leaping onto the stage. He seized Clara's wrist, twisting it until she gasped. "Pretty voice," he sneered, "but it sings for me now." Ropes appeared, binding her to a chair, center stage. The room erupted with cruel laughter. Marcus strutted before them like a ringmaster, eyes glittering. "Tonight we discuss Redstone's future, starting with its sheriff." The doors crashed open. Sheriff Hale filled the frame, rifle in his hands, his badge glinting in lamplight. The crowd stilled, as if the desert itself had walked inside. "Let her go," Daniel ordered. His voice cut sharper than his gun. "This ends now." Marcus grinned wide. "Sheriff Hale, my cousin said you were stubborn, but I didn't think you'd be suicidal." He waved his hand, and rifles lifted around the room. The first shot cracked from the balcony. Daniel dove behind a table, splinters flying. He fired back, his rifle dropping the shooter in a rain of glass. Chaos erupted. Whiskey spilled. Lamps crashed. Smoke coiled thick. The Iron Serpent became a furnace of gunfire. Daniel moved through the haze like a shadow, his shots precise, relentless. Men fell, tables shattered, walls blackened. But for every body, two more pressed in. Clara strained against the ropes, her voice hoarse with shouting. Each muzzle flash lit Daniel's face, a grim portrait of resolve. She feared she was watching his last stand. Marcus lounged by the stage, savoring the carnage. Only when Daniel fought close did he act. Steel flashed as he pressed a knife against Clara's throat. The saloon froze. Daniel's rifle aimed true, but Clara's body blocked his shot. Marcus sneered, breath hot against her ear. "Drop it, Sheriff, or watch her bleed." A thin red line marked Clara's skin. Daniel's hands shook, his teeth clenched. Clara forced herself to meet his gaze. "Don't surrender for me," she said, voice steady through the terror. "You saved this town. Daniel, don't you dare stop." Her words cut through him sharper than any blade. He wavered, torn between duty and love. Marcus laughed, savoring his torment, and then movement stirred from the corner. A scarred veteran pike, one of Crowley's oldest riders, stepped forward. His pistol trembled in his hand, but his eyes burned clear. "No more," he said. The room tensed, the crowd shifting. "I've buried too many friends for men like you. I won't do it again." Marcus's head snapped around, fury twisting his features. "Pike, you worthless dog!" The rest of his curse drowned in gunfire. Pike's shot struck Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The knife slipped from Clara's throat, clattering against the floorboards. Daniel seized the chance. His rifle thundered, striking Marcus in the chest. The would-be king of Redstone stumbled back, blood blooming across his silk vest. He gasped once, eyes wide with disbelief, then crashed against the stage. The iron serpent shuddered with the weight of his fall. Pike's rebellion was brief. Marcus's men cut him down in a hail of bullets, his body falling hard against the bar. But his defiance cracked the spell of fear. The gunfight flared again, fierce and fast. Without Marcus's command, his riders faltered. Some dropped weapons and fled. Others fell where they stood. Smoke curled like ghosts through the rafters. Broken glass littered the floor, blood soaking into sawdust. When silence finally came, it was heavy, absolute. Daniel stumbled forward, cutting Clara's bonds with shaking hands. She collapsed into his arms, breath ragged, tears streaking ash down her cheeks. "You came," she whispered. "Always?" He breathed, holding her as if she might vanish. Their lips met, fierce and desperate, sealing a vow stronger than words. Around them, the iron serpent smoldered, the empire of the Crowleys undone. Outside, the people of Redstone gathered, drawn by the thunder of battle. They saw their sheriff emerge with Clara at his side, smoke billowing behind, hats lifted, voices hushed, as if witnessing the end of an era. Crowley's reign had ended in fire and blood, but the scars would linger, etched into every wall, every heart. And Redstone, though freed, now stood on the edge of whatever came next. Dawn came to Redstone, painted in shades of ash and gold. The iron serpent still smoldered, its blackened skeleton visible from every corner of town. Smoke drifted over the desert like incense, carrying with it the memory of gunfire and the dreams of dead men. Sheriff Daniel Hale stood in his office, methodically cleaning his rifle while Clara tended the coffee on his small stove. Neither had slept every time they closed their eyes. They saw Pike falling, heard Marcus Crowley's final curse, felt the weight of all the choices that had led to this moment. "The territorial marshal will be here by Thursday," Daniel said, not looking up from his work. "Questions to answer, reports to file." Clara set a cup beside his elbow, her hand brushing his shoulder. "Will they let you keep the badge?" "Don't know. Don't much care. If I'm honest." She studied his profile, noting the new lines around his eyes, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. Violence left marks on good men she'd learned that watching him these past months. "What will you do if they take it away?" Daniel finally looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected: peace. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "maybe it's time to try ranching. There's good land north of here, near the river. A man could raise cattle, build something lasting." The unspoken invitation hung between them like a prayer. Clara sat on the edge of his desk, her blue dress the same one she'd worn to the Iron Serpent, now stained with smoke and sorrow. "Ranching's lonely work." "It is," Daniel agreed. "Man would need a good woman to make it worthwhile. Someone who could sing while he worked the fields. Maybe teach their children to read and write." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the future crystallized between them. Not perfect, not easy, but real. I'd like that, Clara whispered. I'd like that very much. They kissed then, soft and gentle, sealing a promise made in blood and kept in love. Outside, Redstone stirred to life. Merchants swept broken glass from their storefronts. Children played in streets that had run red the night before. The town would heal, as towns always did, building new memories over the old scars. Some of Crowley's men had fled into the desert and would likely never return. Others had surrendered and would face territorial justice. A few, the smart ones, had simply ridden away to find new lives in new places. The empire built on fear and gold had crumbled in a single night, but the people of Redstone would remember what it felt like to be free. Dr. Morrison stopped by around noon, checking the cuts on Clara's wrists and the bruises on Daniel's ribs. "You two should be dead," he said matter-of-factly. 20 men, and you walked out alive. That's not luck, that's divine intervention. "Maybe," Daniel said, "or maybe love's stronger than hate." The old doctor smiled. "In your case, Sheriff, I believe it is." By evening, a crowd had gathered outside the jail. Not the angry mob Daniel might have expected, but families, men, women, and children who wanted to say thank you. They brought food, flowers, handmade gifts, nothing fancy, but everything heartfelt. Old Martha from the general store pressed a quilt into Clara's hands. "For when you two get married," she said with a wink, "every home needs something beautiful." The blacksmith shook Daniel's hand with tears in his eyes. "My boy can grow up free because of what you did. That's worth more than gold." One by one, they came to pay their respects not to heroes, but to neighbors who had stood when standing mattered most. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, Daniel and Clara found themselves alone on the jail's front porch. The stars were coming out, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird sang. "No regrets?" Daniel asked, his arm around her shoulders. Clara leaned into his warmth, remembering the girl who'd stepped off the stagecoach 5 years ago with nothing but a broken suitcase and a voice full of sorrow. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd found love in the darkest place and fought to keep it. "None," she said firmly. "Not a single one." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Redstone settle into peaceful evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, they had each other, and they had hope. In the distance, someone was playing guitar, the melody drifting over the desert wind. Clara hummed along, her voice weaving through the night air like a blessing. It was a new song, not about sorrow or loss, but about love that endures, about ordinary people who do extraordinary things, about the fire that burns in every human heart when freedom is at stake. Redstone listened, and in her voice, they heard their own story, how a town died and was reborn, how darkness fell and light returned, how two souls found each other in the ashes and chose to build something beautiful from the ruins. The fire in Redstone had burned bright and fierce, consuming everything false and leaving only what was true. And what was true was this: love endures, justice matters, and sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. And so, Redstone was never the same. Love, blood, and sacrifice carved its name into the desert wind. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Wild West tales. Tell us in the comments, what would you sacrifice for love and justice?